Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of In Conversation. This is the series where we chat with the musicians and artists associated with the concerts that we put on. My name is Nicholas Arnold. I'm the Director of Marketing and Project Development at Attila Glatz Concerts, and I am thrilled to introduce my guest today. In anticipation of our upcoming Frozen in concert in Toronto at Meridian Hall, it is none other than the one and only Christophe Beck. Christophe's resume is so long and extensive, I could spend the entire interview just listing off his credits. Everything from Ant-Man, WandaVision, Agatha All Along, which is now streaming on Disney+, to, of course, the Frozen franchise, Frozen, Frozen 2, and the upcoming Frozen 3. He's also scored much of our childhood, if you're my age. He did Cheaper by the Dozen, the Hangover films, and if you're a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, he scored 3 seasons of that show, including the famous musical episode, Once More with Feeling. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Christophe. He's such a great guy, and especially if you're into film scores in any way, this is just a really cool conversation. I hope you enjoy. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. What a thrill to have this discussion with you today.
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. I want to go back to the beginning of your career, obviously, just at the start. You studied at USC, and you studied under Jerry Goldsmith, which he happens to have composed one of my favorite horror scores, which is Poltergeist, but along with, Planet of the Apes, Logan's Run. What I'm wondering is, A, what was it like studying under him, and to this day, are there takeaways that you have from that those lessons with him?
Absolutely. Jerry was one of my teachers right at the start of USC. What I found with Jerry was there was a directness and a simplicity. It's almost like he had a direct line to my heart or my feelings, and it was just a way that his music affected me. I very quickly learned by listening to him teach us in our class. One of the things that comes from is a sense of economy. With Jerry, he would, like many film composers, compose themes for characters and situations, but his approach to taking those themes and making and spinning an entire score out of them was incredible. If you listen to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, the famous one, da, 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 you have an entire first movement that goes on 8 or 10 minutes that's based entirely on that motif. And I think Beethoven's widely regarded as a master of economy, as a master of making something incredible out
Mm.
of very simple um, elements. And I feel like Jerry should be placed up there right next to Beethoven in terms of his ability to do that. And if you listen to a Jerry Goldsmith action piece, you can look at the part in the basses that's going and dissect the notes and realize that's actually the same notes as being used in the main theme. And then, of course, there might be a rhythmic part that overlays on top of that, and you'll realize he's actually taking the rhythm from this other theme and putting it there. So it's like every element in every piece is related to some other element in some other piece, and he has a genius way of making so having so much impact out of actually really a very simple and very um, um, economical use of very few ideas. He just makes so much out of so little.
I can't remember if I read it in an interview or heard it in an interview with you, but you were talking about kind of experimenting. I think it was with Ant-Man, and kind of presenting your work to Kevin Feige, and it was all these different instruments, and he was saying like, yeah, okay, but I want it to sound like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
actual music. So I'm just wondering where you find those opportunities to experiment, while also still kind of restraining yourself for what audiences expect from a Marvel movie, a Hollywood film.
Every movie is an opportunity to experiment. And every movie is also a process of my role as a composer. And this is where I get into trouble sometimes. My role as a composer is not to come up with some cool idea for an experiment that I've never had to try before, but always wanted to, and then sandwiching it or forcing it in to to a film score.
Mm.
I do sometimes succumb to that urge, and it's okay. Uh, but it's my job to notice when I'm doing that, especially notice when it's not landing with my collaborators. And the other thing I'm always remembering as I do this work is that it's a collaborative medium, and I'm working in service of a story outside of myself, in service of filmmakers telling that story. And part of what makes me good at my job is that I've learned to wholeheartedly embrace my role when it comes to doing a film score. So yeah, sometimes I get excited, and in the case of Ant-Man, it was with the director Peyton Reed, to try something maybe a little wacky or something that's maybe exciting to me, and I lose sight of the bigger picture. And it takes someone like Kevin to come in, who has a very clear and very thoughtful vision for what the film should be, and then just to sit me down with the director, and then just have a little discussion, like, are we pushing this a little too far here? Like, let's think about what we're actually making here.
Just want to quickly ask, because I don't know if a lot of people will know this, but you did the new arrangement for Disney's 100th
I
logo,
did.
When You Wish Upon a Star, which I
Right.
just think is there. I imagine there's a lot of pressure in taking such an iconic piece, but at the same time, it is such a beautiful piece in its own right. That melody.
Yeah.
How do you even dare to approach that? Again, with restraints while also making your own mark. It's the 100th year. It's a big deal.
Well, first of all, it is such an honor, and that word is thrown around a lot in my industry. But to be asked to be in charge of putting together the 100th anniversary of that logo music, that particular song, it made me feel like I was part of the Disney family in a way that I haven't really felt before. There's a difference between the amount of scrutiny that goes into some 90-second piece of music that is just sitting under a piece of dialogue in a movie. Not to say that we don't think about it real hard and listen to it real closely and talk about it a lot. But it's, in that case, it's me, it's the director, it may be a producer, and we have an understanding of what the role is of that piece of music in the film, and it probably not the most important piece of music in the film. Contrast that to the Disney logo, where there are many, many very important people who have a lot of interest in what this is going to look like and sound like. So there was a process of, first of all, back and forth with they're making a new version of the castle imagery as well, and the timings are changing here and there, and so there's a lot of back and forth and adjusting of what it's going to do. We knew, and I felt this also, like there was no discussion of changing, um that it's going to be Wish Upon a Star. And there was, and to me, the bulk of that 45-second piece of music is the kind of glorious reveal of that main tune that everybody knows. And when I heard that, I was like, well, there's absolutely no reason to change that whatsoever. So if I recall, the last two-thirds of that piece are more or less identical to the last two-thirds of the iterations that came before. I think we may have added choir where there wasn't before, or if we did, we used it a little bit differently, and I may have just adjusted a few things here and there. But like for all intents and purposes, it's the same piece of music. Where I focused my attention was on the introduction, which in the previous iteration they had decided to go for something a little more maybe high concept and a little more evocative and ethereal. And taking it back to the 100th anniversary, I felt like it needed to be a little bit more grounded, to come back a little bit to its roots. But I'm like, here's an opportunity to bring it a little bit like down to earth. So the very first thing you hear in my intro is that melody played on a solo French horn. You still get the idea that it's something out there in the ether coming together, which is what I loved about the previous version. But what you get this time is right away, you know what you're hearing, you know it's Wish Upon a Star. The part that I did that is new is really the first 15 seconds of just how we get into that big reveal of the castle, and now we're into the iconic classic arrangement.
Jumping into Frozen, did you? I mean, Frozen. Most Disney animated films were a hit, but when you worked on this film and got it, did you have an inkling that it was going to be as big as it did become?
No, none of us did. I remember at USC when I first started getting to know how the industry kind of maps out. It became very clear to me that there are certain kinds of movies that really excited me that I could start to dream about one day doing. And one of them was like a big Disney animated film. I did a short for Disney animation called Paperman that was brilliant and an incredible showcase for music. I consider myself extremely lucky that I was hired to do that score for that short because it went on to win the Oscar and established a good relationship between me and the Disney people. When they were thinking about composers for Frozen, they brought me in for a meeting, and if I recall correctly, they didn't bring anyone else in. It's like they made a decision that they wanted me to score Frozen, and that was that. And I remember being so thrilled that this long-standing dream to do a big Disney animated film was coming to fruition. And what they showed me at the time, well, there wasn't much to show me. There's none of the animation had been done yet. It was hard to get a sense of what it was going to look like. At the time I was brought in, they were still very much working on the story as well, and there were elements of the story that were very different from what it ended up being. I got a chance to hear "Let It Go" by the Lopez's, and it was clear that that had something in it that was going to. I mean, nobody could predict that it would become iconic the way it has. Um, but the experience was like, okay, this is exciting, and who knows? Who knows what this is going to end up as. The original demo for Let It Go is a different story. I have plenty of experience making demos and understanding that it can sound like this today and can sound like this in a year. So that was easy to hear that there was going to be something there that people could love.
I'm wondering if you can just walk us through that process of working with the Lopez's. Talk to how closely are you working with them in tandem? Do they come and you've worked with them on WandaVision as well? What is that like?
Once a week, Bobby and Kristen would meet with the writing team. When you're writing songs for a musical, because of the way the intention is that the songs be an integral part of the storytelling, that they're not just thrown in after the fact, but actually songs are moments when characters make a big reveal or there's a real shift in the story. So there needs to be a lot of collaboration between the songwriters and the writers, the script writers. And they would invite me to sit in on these meetings from time to time, especially if they knew that that they were going to be discussing a particular scene in the movie that had a song in it. That the songs were to be treated as integral story elements, and I could bring that ethos into how I take the melodies from the songs and then incorporate them into the score. It's not just a fun exercise that I get to do. It actually has meaning. Bob and Kristen, they don't micromanage how I take their melodies. They're like, "We trust you, do your thing." It's the question I always ask myself when I pull up a scene in any movie. What theme, if any, would be most appropriate to be in this piece of music here? Which theme will bring the most depth to the storytelling? How do I present that theme? What instrument? What style? And it's just that same process now with Frozen.
And it makes sense that even that film would end with "Do you want to build a snowman?" with the sisters being reunited. Like it's not just because the melody's pretty or anything like that. Like there's thematic reason for it, and it feels like closure to the whole thing. So we're doing Frozen in concert in November. Full orchestra is going to play your entire score in sync to the film. And what I've loved about the audience that we've been building and doing these is we're attracting people with the IPs with the films, fans of these movies, and a lot of people come away from these concerts going, "I didn't notice this about the music. I didn't notice."
Yeah.
It really brings out a lot for them, and it's fostering. I like to think that slowly but surely we're fostering an interest in film scores by doing it. That it's not just okay, we'll put this hit movie on
Totally.
and do that, right?
Yeah.
So a bit of a challenging question, and you hinted at it there, but I guess what I'd ask is anybody who's sitting there interested, who maybe has an interest in film music as either a fan or maybe wants to compose, what would you ask them to maybe listen for as it's being played live, different elements of your score? What are
Uh,
particular things that you're relatively proud of with that one that you'd love for people to pick up when it's live?
I would say listen for the songs. A lot of people who let's say by now they would have grown up with Frozen, and maybe they are now have more mature tastes, or they figured out what they like and don't like about music. But those songs, maybe their experience of the movie was more of the songs and less of the score. Was to notice all the things we've been talking about, to notice where there are melodies in the score that refer back to the songs. It could be like a little Easter egg hunt. It's interesting too that you asked that question, because yes, the first part of my answer is true, and the second part of my answer is, you know, buy the soundtrack or find it on Spotify and listen to it and play that game there, because I would love for people when they come to see this performance of Frozen to just take in the whole experience, and let themselves get captured by the story, captured by the characters, captured by the music, and just let those feelings come up. Let yourself root for the characters that you want to root for. Let yourself boo the villain that you want to boo. Um, and you won't be able to ignore the fact that there's a beautiful giant orchestra directly in front of you as well. So just take that in as well, and not worry too much about maybe analysis or playing games.
Chris, this was fantastic, man. Thank you so much. It's been such a
Yeah,
pleasure getting to know your career and just also just the philosophy of your work and everything. I love
totally.
uncovering that. So thank you.
Great, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
Absolutely. We'll see you in Toronto soon.